Here we go. Hello.
Hello.
Right. Good evening, all. We are going to talk today about Hanissim.
Oh.
Hanissim, which we say. Thank you for bringing that, Goldie. We say on Chanukah and Purim. Okay. Now, first question is, what is special about Chanukah and Purim that we should have a special insert in our Tefilah?
We won.
We won. Okay, Leslie says we won. Okay, so are we going? There is Hallel on Hanukkah, yes. On what page? 206, right, thank you.
But there's no Muslim.
Right, no Musaf. Okay, no Musaf is an important feature. Right, so
You should.
it is. So go on. Why do we have Hanissim? Because
The miracles. We won against tremendous odds.
yes, miracles. We won against tremendous odds. That's a very good way of putting it. Miracles is another way of putting it.
It was beyond the period of the Torah.
Okay, so now you're answering questions I haven't yet asked.
Okay, well,
Okay, but I'm coming to them, right? So you're definitely ahead of me because I'm coming to these questions. The first question is, why do we have Hanissim? And the answer is, well, we have to look inside and see what Hanissim is about, and it is about Nissim, about miracles.
Yeah.
And so we have the extra prayer on Chanukah and Purim because we acknowledge that the events of Purim and the events of
Couldn't
Chanukah
have happened
were miraculous.
without miracles. Yeah.
Couldn't have happened without miracles.
a bit
And-
like today, really.
well, exactly. Now there are those people who were in favour of saying Al Hanissim on Yom Yerushalayim, which basically commemorated the victory of the 6-Day War, which in many people's view, including mine, was miraculous. 6-Day War was perhaps no less miraculous than the Hanukkah story.
I just have to say something to intersperse something that I heard yesterday about all these wars. The ones who win the wars are the ones who are better prepared and who have better intelligence, according to the pundits.
Okay, well, we're talking miracles here. We're not talking about preparations. So there are those that would say that the 6-Day War, 1948 war, all of our wars, you could argue, are miraculous, and we should say Al Hanissim. And certainly there was a move to insert Al Hanissim into the prayers on Yom Yerushalayim. It didn't take hold, and the chief rabbinate here in Israel shied away from it. Not surprisingly, because the chief rabbinate in Israel is apolitical, not apolitical, but A brackets political and B Haredi, and therefore on both counts would not be keen on recognizing miracles around the state of Israel. So it never took hold.
Where would you, if you follow that line of thinking through, where would you actually draw the line? Because there's lots of other things from the Torah that have been miraculous, but we don't actually say Al Hanissim. We celebrate with Hallel or whatever.
National miracles, I think. You know, miracles that happen to you and me, Frank. Well, we can say our own Thanksgiving for that, but national miracles, and that's what Purim and Chanukah are. National miracles where there is existential threat.
Suppose though we don't say Hanissim on Pesach when there are very obvious miracles.
No, Pesach. But Pesach is we know what we do on Pesach. Pesach is in the Torah. It tells us exactly what to do. We have Musaf, we have Korbanot, we have it's in a totally different category. We're talking about non-Torah events after these period of time, and I think the criteria would be, Frank, and that's why people said, you know, after the 6-Day War, this fits that criteria: a national miracle where there was an existential threat. Okay, now those of you who were
what was the reason for not saying it on Yom Ha'atzmaut?
again, there are those that would argue that you should that was also a national existential threat. Bit more in Yom Ha'atzmaut because we didn't actually have a nation until afterwards. Yes, Johnny.
You know when Hanissim was inserted into the Amidah?
Very, very good question. We'll come to that in a minute.
Okay.
We're definitely coming to that in a minute. So, so Hanissim was inserted because these were miraculous events where there was an existential threat, both in Purim and in Chanukah. So let's go straight to Johnny's question. When was it inserted into the davening? Well, we know as early as the Talmud Bavli, the Gemara, which was written when?
200 in the
200 was the Mishnah.
200 years before the Christian era.
600, isn't it? 600.
Between 400 and 500 CE.
Yeah. CE?
CE.
That late?
Yes. The Mishnah was written. The Mishnah was written down, was redacted by Rabbi Yehuda Nasi around about 200.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
130 or so years after the destruction of the Second Temple. The Gemara was evolved after that over the next 250, 300 years. It evolved through the rabbis' discussions in Yavne, in Tzipori, in the Galil, where all of the in Yerushalmi and in the Bavli, in Bavel, in Pumbedisa, in Surya, all of these places where the great yeshivot type places were, great institutes of learning. And it was eventually written down around about 500. So we know that it was there. It was Hanissim existed at that time because it's mentioned in the Gemara. It's mentioned.
Megillat Esther also says that it should be at the end.
Okay, so
he says that it should be remembered every year.
Correct. In the Megillat Esther, it talks, but it doesn't specifically talk about Hanissim.
Whereas
the Gemara in Shabbat 24a does mention it specifically. I'm just going to get up the Gemara for the Zoom people, and then I'll pull out the Gemara. Maybe you can pull me out, Yosef. Maybe you can pull me out the first volume of Shabbat, please, while I just get it up on the screen for those who are watching it. Sefaria Shabbat 24a. Okay, let's have a look.
Fantastic, that Sefaria, isn't it?
Amazing, absolutely amazing.
Amazing.
What's amazing?
Sefaria. Okay, so here we go. Right, here the Gemara. I'm just going to put it on the screen for you Zoomers. Thank you, Yosef. Zoom, share screen. That one. Okay, you Zoomers should be able to see my Sefaria now. Can you see it?
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So, thank you. So in the Gemara, it says here, Ibayelahu, they raised a question. Mahu lahazkir shel Chanukah bevirchat hamazon. What is the halacha with mentioning Chanukah in benching, birkat hamazon? Kevan demiderabananhu lo mad karinan. Okay, since it is a rabbinic law. What's a rabbinic law?
The rabbis instituted it.
Yeah, mentioning Hanissim is a rabbinic law. Maybe we don't mention it. Why shouldn't we mention it in benching if it's a rabbinic law? What is benching?
Because originally Birkat Hamazon, the first bracha anyway, comes from the Torah.
Well, yes, no, it doesn't matter which bracha it is. Birkat Hamazon is.
It's a personal prayer.
It is a deoraita. It's a what prayer, Johnny?
Personal prayer.
Benching, I'm talking about.
Yeah, we're thanking God for what he's given
We
us.
are, but it's a bracha deoraita. How many brachot are the deoraita?
Don't know.
One.
Shema Yisrael.
Brachot.
That's not Shema Yisrael isn't a
Shema
bracha.
Yisrael's not a bracha.
Is it what? Is it? This is the
This is it. The only birchat hamazon. And where does it come from? V'sava ve'achalta, and you shall eat. V'savata, and you shall be satisfied.
Verach.
Uberachta, and you shall bless. Okay, so it is it is a bracha deoraita. So the Gemara says maybe it's a question of the
Does
Gemara.
it
One
appear
second.
in the Torah?
What does it mean? Ve'achalta v'savata ve'erachta? Of course it does.
Yeah, I can't remember where.
So so he says maybe the Gemara says maybe because this is a deoraita and al Hanissim is drabanon. Maybe we don't interfere with that. Or he says, or Dilma, or maybe mishum pirsume nisa mad kerinan pirsume nisa. Now that's something that you will hear a lot to do with Chanukah. Pirsume nisa. What is in modern Hebrew a pirsum or a pirsum?
It's an advert. An
An
advert.
advert.
Yes.
An advert. And what does an advert do?
It
publicizes.
publicizes the miracle.
What does the word mefursam mean?
Famous.
Famous.
Yeah.
And why is something famous?
Because it's from.
Because everybody knows
Yeah.
about it. So pirsume nisa means to publicize
A
a
miracle.
miracle,
Ah,
right? Now, on Chanukah, that is one of the important features of Chanukah, more than Purim and more than any other situation in the Jewish calendar, is pirsume nisa. There is I'm not going to say there's a halacha, because it's not a halacha, but there's a very strong minhag to publicize the miracle. Who can tell me examples of how we publicize the miracle on Chanukah?
Candles.
The
In the
candles.
window.
The candles.
Not the candles themselves.
No, lighting them. You have to
Where
put
you
them in
put
your
the
window.
candles,
Yeah,
right?
that's what
You
I mean.
put-
Yeah.
The halacha is you put where should you put your candles?
Where it can be seen from
Outside. You should
yeah.
put them outside.
Yeah.
On the street where everybody can see them. That's how they used to do it. And in fact,
really
those of you who are coming with us on the Tiul to Yerushalayim, there's still some places left for those of you who haven't yet booked. We'll see part of our Tiul is to walk around the Jewish quarter after we've lit at the Kotel before we come home, and you will see it's beautiful in the Jewish quarter. Loads of people have got their Chanukiot outside. They have little coves for them to put in the wall itself of the house, and that is how it's meant to be done. Why? Because you're meant to show everybody pirsume nisa. You're meant to publicize the miracle. Now, that's what we do. Now, there is another thing that some people do, pirsume nisa.
Run around in fancy dress in the streets.
I don't know about running around with fancy dress in the streets on Chanukah.
No.
Oh, you go to
Hanukkah.
Golders Green.
Are you Chanukah?
Yeah. Oh,
I
no,
mean,
Purim.
No, we're talking Chanukah.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
You're slightly mixed up
I'm
there,
sorry.
Jeff.
Okay. Pirsume nisa. Chabad. What do Chabad do?
Oh, they do it on the street.
They put all these big Chanukiot in prominent places, right? That's all about Pirsume nisa. I don't know whether Chabad in your areas do this. Certainly where I come from, they have them on the top of a car. You know, they strap these big Chanukiot on top of a car and
Trafalgar Square.
Trafalgar Square and Albert
The White
Square in
House.
Manchester. Huh?
The White
The
House.
White House.
It's
yeah,
been
I'm sure.
it's been forbidden in Sweden, I think.
So I had a whole discussion
They
about
used
this. I did a shiur online. I can send you the link to it. A few years ago now, it must have been the beginning of COVID, and it was called Christmas and the Jews. And we talked in that shiur. We talked about the concept of Christmas trees here in Israel, and Chanukiot in Christian countries, and whether it was appropriate. And there was one particular fellow in our community whose name I shan't mention, who basically said we should have no Christmas trees, should not be allowed in Israel, and we should not be putting Chanukiot anywhere outside there in the Goyish world. It was an interesting and rather extreme view, but we had a whole interesting discussion about it. I can send you the link to the shiur if you're interested. Anyway, Pirsume Nisa, it's about publicizing the miracle. That's what the Gemara says.
So what chapter are you on? So what chapter?
24a, page 24a. So he says maybe it's because of Pirsumei Nisa that we do mention it. We're mentioning it in benching to publicize it to everybody who's listening to benching. Yes, Hannah.
Many long years ago, and I don't know if it exists today, but if you used to travel at Hanukkah, on Hanukkah at night on the buses intercity, all the settlements and kibbutzim and moshavim used to have big Hanukkahot facing the road. And you, as the bus went down the road,
How beautiful.
you see
beautiful.
one after the other.
Those of you who can't see, Hannah's got a huge smile on her face as she's remembering these
Hanukkah
It still exists,
and
no?
that's quite
Hannah.
and that's absolutely right.
But isn't it
I-
still the same today?
I don't know how to
Possibly,
travel by bus at
but
night.
that is
It's the same, yeah.
exactly Pirsumei Nisa. They are fulfilling the mitzvah of Pirsumei Nisa to a very high degree. These days, where we live in houses which are not right on the street, most of us, not like in the Jewish the Jewish quarter in the old city. Those of us that live in blocks of flats, it's even more difficult. So we can't really fulfill that mitzvah of Pirsumei Nisa so good, but that's a very good example. Anyway, I want to just go on in the Gemara because I've not come to the bit that's important yet. So the Gemara says, should we mention Al Hanissim in, should we mention Al Hanissim in, or should we mention Chanukah in benching or not? And then Rava says, Amar Rava, Amar Rav Schora, Amar Rav Huna, Einu Mazkir. We don't mention it. He says we do not mention it. And then he says, but Mazkir in Bala Hazkir, if he's going to mention it, Mazkir b'hoda'ah. You mention it during the, what's hoda'ah?
Giving thanks.
Thanks.
During the in the bracha of thanksgiving. No delacha. Correct. No delacha. That's the begin. That is the bracha of thanksgiving, isn't it? In benching. What does no delacha mean? We thank you, and we thank you for all those. And where do we actually put Al Hanissim? In no delacha. That's exactly where we put it. This Gemara tells us. Rav Huna says, I don't think you should be mentioning it at all. But if you're going to mention it, this is where it goes. Right.
Rav Huna said that.
Rav Huna
He
says
said
that.
you shouldn't be mentioning
Correct.
it.
Rav Huna says, Eino mazkir, you don't mention it. Ve'im bala hazkir, but if you're going to mention it, mazkir b'hoda'ah. Okay? That's where you do it. Then there's a machlokas and say, no, we should put it in a different bracha. What other bracha might we put it in? Which would make a bit of sense.
The last one.
Which
V'al
is
hakol. V'al hakol.
Ve'al hakol.
אנחנו מודים לך.
Well, okay, ve'al hakol nachnu modim lach is part of hoda'ah, yes. Bonei Yerushalayim. The Gemara says here a different opinion. Rava says we should mention it in Bonei Yerushalayim. Why does that make sense? Because of what was Hanukkah all about? It was about rededicating the temple in Yerushalayim. So that would make a bit of sense. Okay, and then we come to what we were talking about, I wanted to talk about tonight. Amalahu Rav Sheshet. Rav Sheshet said, Kitfilah, we mention it just like we do in the Tefilah. Which Tefilah are we talking about? When the Gemara says Tefilah, what does it mean?
Amida.
The Amida, correct. Where do we, so that says the Gemara, Ma Tefilah. Where do we say it in Tefilah? Where do we say Al Hanissim?
Modim.
In Modim.
Yeah.
B'hoda'ah, in the bracha of thanksgiving. Af birkat hamazon b'hoda'ah. So therefore, in birkat hamazon, we say in the bracha of hoda'ah, of thanksgiving, which is in Nodeh, and that is the halacha. So to answer the question of where, when Al Hanissim was first introduced, we know that it was already introduced by the time of the Gemara. Now, the actual text of Al Hanissim is not in the Gemara,
Right.
okay? But the concept of mentioning the miracles of Chanukah and the miracles of Purim is already mentioned in the Gemara. So it's very ancient. Now, to answer the question, one sec, Fran, I've just come to the answer this little question here that we had. Where is it first, the actual text of Al Hanissim? Let's take that share off now. Where the text of Al Hanissim is first introduced, where do we first see that? It's very old. Well, what was the first version of the Siddur that we know?
Tonsino.
Not Sonsino, before Sonsino. Before Sonsino.
Babylonia.
Rav Amram Gaon, okay, in the Gaonic period. That was the first Siddur, around about the 9th century, is the oldest version that we have of any kind of Tefilah. Our Tefilah that we have now would not be recognizable by Rav Amram Gaon, because over the next 1200 years, not so much evolved as added on to. Nobody ever takes anything out, and nobody ever adds things in. So our Tefillot are actually much longer than they ever used to be, because we keep adding bits in. The actual words of Hanissim are first found in the Siddur of Rav Amram Gaon, which is the very oldest Siddur that we have. So it's a very old prayer. It's a very old prayer. And so the question we've got is, first of all, is why in Modim? Well, we've asked. We know it's in Modim. Why in Modim? Because that's what it says in the Gemara. But we've answered the question. We've asked the question, and in fact, it was an opinion in the Gemara that could be in Bonei Yerushalayim. It would make sense. Where else might we put it in the Amida, if not in Modim? We might put it in Vili Yerushalayim Yercha, mightn't we? For the same reason. But we also might put it in Ritzei. What's Ritzei about? Ritzei, Hashem Elokeinu b'yamcha Yisrael v'litfilasam she'ei v'hashev et avodah lidvir beitecha. It's about returning the service in the Beit HaMikdash. Now, if one sec, if Chanukah was about anything, it was about returning the service into the Beit HaMikdash, wasn't it? So you would think that would be a good place to put it. And in fact, there is an opinion that says that's where it should be. We don't paskin like that. We put it in Modim, and we'll see why we put it in Modim in a minute. Frank first, and then Hannah.
You were talking about the original sources.
Speak up so they can hear you.
You were speaking about the original sources, both in terms of in the Amida, in coming intervention. Were Chanukah and Purim always discussed as one, or was it one and followed by the other?
They were lumped together as miraculous times, which didn't fall into the Yalav Yovo. What's Yalav Yovo about? Yalav Yovo Chagim, which are mentioned in the Torah. So we haven't got a Yalav Yovo for Purim or Chanukah. Difference between Purim and Chanukah, of course, is correct, and therefore Hallel. We don't say Purim. We don't say Hallel on Purim. Okay, we do say Hallel on Chanukah. One of the reasons given for that is because we don't say Hallel on a miracle that happened outside the land of Israel. I'm not so sure that I'm too chuffed about that response, to be honest.
You would have thought the Maccabees would have introduced Hanissim after they won the battles.
Maybe they did, Johnny. Maybe they did. We don't. What we don't know is what went on before Rav Amram Gaon. All we can say is that the first time we know about it is in Rav Amram Gaon Siddur, because that's the first Siddur we have. It may well be that the Maccabees did introduce it. We'll talk about the Maccabees in a little while. So it's in Modim because what is Modim about? Giving thanks for what?
The miracles.
What kind of miracles specifically? Exactly. Let's just have a look and go back a few weeks in our Tefilah Shiur. Modim anachnu lach. We thank you. I know it. Right. We thank you. Well, we recognize you that you are Hashem. Perhaps for the purposes of this Modim, we should say we recognize you. Okay, we say all of those things. Va'al nisecha shebechol yom imanu. Because for all the miracles that are shebechol yom, all day and every day, imanu, with us. Are we party to miracles all day, every day?
It's one of your 5 children, though.
Correct. Absolutely. Miracle. He says, I've got 5 children because there are 5 things. Nishmotenu, Chayenu, Nishmotenu, Techa, Niflotecha, and Vatovatecha. 5 correspond to my 5 children. Johnny. Johnny remembers that shiur. Okay, so but this is the point, that we are modim, we are thankful to Hashem. Al nisecha shebechol yom imanu. So what kind of miracle are we thanking Hashem for in that prayer? For hidden miracles, right? Miracles that not, flashbang pyrotechnic miracles. These are miracles that don't appear to be miracles. The fact that we breathe every day, the fact that we can, eat, go to the toilet, and do all our daily activities.
Yeah, but we say brachos for that, don't we?
Yeah, but this is where we do. But this is where we thank Hashem for that particular aspect of our lives, the miraculous aspect of our lives, Jonathan, that we don't think about as miracles. That's the point. How often do we think and stop and think what a miracle it is that we can see and hear and eat and defecate, right? These are all miracles. Yeah, we come out of the toilet and we say Asher Yatza, right? As we're doing something else, as we're washing our hands.
Isn't that part of a miracle, though?
It is a miracle.
Wait a
That's what he's saying.
second. I mean,
That's exactly what I'm saying. But what we do, Jonathan, is we don't stop and think that these are miracles, do
Jonathan
it?
looks
You take it for
disgusted.
granted,
wait a
really.
second.
Yeah, we take it for granted. We take it for granted because it's not an obvious miracle to us. Yes, if we stop and think about it, certainly somebody who's been very poorly in their lives and who's never been, who's not been able to do these
Got
things,
IBS or
or
got
whatever it is, and they are now healthy again. They have an appreciation for a certain period of time, at least.
Yeah.
They would have am I right, Leslie?
Absolutely.
You have an appreciation of the miracle of everyday life. But generally speaking, we don't. Generally speaking, those miracles pass us by. We don't recognize them as miracles. Now, what was the specific thing about Purim and Chanukah in terms of miracles? If I said to you, was it a miracle when Moshe hit the rock and water came out?
yes.
You'd say everybody knows that's a miracle. Now, was the fact that there was a military victory,
Survival.
that's a miracle in itself? Was it the fact that there was a military victory in the time of Chanukah at the Chashmonaim? Was that as obvious a miracle as Moshe hitting the rock? No, of course not. Because it could have just been very good tactics. They were guerrilla warfare. Philip will come and tell us that they had better preparation, and they were this, and they were that, and the other, and whatever it is. Okay, one sec. Let's just finish this thought. So the fact is that it would be easy for us not to recognize the miracles of Chanukah and Purim. For us. It's obvious because we've been saying it for all our lives. We've been saying Al Hanissim all our lives. The fact that we are saying Al Hanissim is to recognize that these are miracles, because it would be very easy for us, and some people do. Some people even try to, rationalize the 10 plagues and say, well, the blood wasn't really blood; it was just clay in the thing, and the locust was because a wind blew this way and that way, and the sea split because of this, and a tectonic plate and an earthquake. All it just happened to be at that particular time. Yeah, so
that was a miracle.
You can rationalize miracles out. This would be very easy to rationalize out because it's not so obvious. So along comes our prayers and say, where you're going to put this prayer? You're going to put it together with those miracles that you do not recognize as much as you should, which is the Nisecha Shebachol Yom Imanu. Those miracles that are with us every single day, right? That we have. And that's why we have Al Hanissim where we have it. All those other places, Ritzei would be a place to put it. Uvenei Yerushalayim would be a good place to put it, right? And Vil Yerushalayim Ircha would be a good place to put it. But the best place to put it is where it fits in to the category of miracles that we perhaps might not recognize. Now, it's difficult for us to put ourselves in that position because it's been drummed into us since we were in Cheder that this was a miracle of the oil, etc. Have a look in Al Hanissim. We'll have a look in the words in a minute. We'll have a look in Al Hanissim, and you'll see whether there is any mention of the miracle of the oil. You ask any kid outside of Israel, what was the miracle of Hanukkah? What will they tell you?
That the oil lasted for
Oil.
8
They'll
days.
tell you the miracle of the oil, right? Not so much in Israel. There'll be Israeli kids will also tell you about the military victory, and it's very interesting. Why? Why is it that Chutz La'aretz kids and us, all of us included, why were we told that it was the miracle of the oil that was the main miracle? That's why we were told miracle of the oil, miracle of the oil.
Because the kids here are militarized.
Because we weren't in a position to fight. We couldn't grasp the concept of Jews
not
fighting wars, because we were for 2,000 years.
We
you
were,
know,
we
we
were
were just
persecuted.
yeah,
But in Israel, I should assume that they're used as a kind of a role model.
correct.
for
That's why
eventual-
correct in modern Israel, the Maccabees are a great bunch of heroes because they were fighters,
Yeah.
right? The modern Israeli, the modern and a number of people of when I say modern Israeli, I mean I'm talking about those born after the state, our age, born after the state, found it very, very difficult to grasp the whole concept of the Holocaust. They couldn't get it.
Yeah, yeah,
They couldn't get it. I remember speaking to Tzvika. Do you remember Tzvika Zimmerman?
yeah.
I remember him telling me this at a Shalosh Shudas once. He says that when he was growing up, he was a secular, he became from later in his life, he was a secular Jew, born in Israel, went to a secular school. They could not grasp the concept of the Holocaust.
But the Jews didn't fight
it
back.
disgusted them.
Yeah, yeah.
It disgusted them that Jews, as it were,
Didn't fight back.
didn't fight back. And in
But
fact,
they did.
okay, they did in certain places,
Yeah,
but
but
that's
not
not what
much.
they were taught. They were taught that they went like lambs to the slaughter. And in fact, if you have a look at the Yom HaZikaron LeShoah, what is it really called?
The Gvura, the Shoah
The
Gvura.
Shoah or the Gvura.
Yeah.
It's not called Holocaust Day. It's called Holocaust and Gvura
And-
bravery
Bravery Day.
bravery
Yeah.
day. And when did they make Yom HaShoah?
Before
At the time of the uprising of the Warsaw Ghetto. Because the only way the modern Israeli could grasp this whole business of the Holocaust was to bolt onto it, this fight. They couldn't grasp it, right? Whereas we in the diaspora for thousands of years, we weren't fighters, mostly. I mean, you know, there were pockets of it, but mostly we were not fighters.
We were lovers.
And in fact, there are those who say that the miracle of the oil was actually a made-up miracle that the rabbis brought in after the destruction of the temple, at a much later date, because you don't find the miracle of the oil in Sefer HaMaccabees at all.
Where
It-
did this
Hmm?
the made up bit? Where did that come from?
There are those that say that the rabbis introduced this idea of the miracle of the oil because after the destruction of the temple, the concept of a military victory was just so far out of their comfort zone, and they bolted on. Now, even if you say they didn't make it up and it happened and there was a miracle and it's all occurred, certainly the emphasis for 2,000 years has been on the miracle of oil and not the miracle of the military victory. Look in Hanissim, you will not see mention of the oil. Let's have a look at the words. And Frank's got a sour face on his eye, doesn't like any of this. Why not, Frank?
Because you made the point that perhaps that the oil and the lights was something outside of Israel, not within Israel. But here, I mean, first of all, the whole thing is Hanukkah is a festival of light. Why the light? Because of the oil. It's you go into since Sukkot, the shops have had soft daniot.
Yep.
The whole thing is you're not going out and
No,
buying
no,
like,
no. You misunderstood what I said. I'm not saying that they don't
Comment on-
emphasize the oil here. What I'm saying is that here in Israel, there is an equal or at least a much greater emphasis than in Chutz La'aretz on the military victory, because they can conceptualize that. And in Chutz La'aretz, be honest, how many of you round this table were taught in Hanukkah in anything like as much as the miracle of the oil about the military victory. We weren't. No, we weren't. It's mentioned, but we weren't. Yes,
We
Josh?
were.
Three of my kids just came home from Cheder and Gun, ages 4, 4.5, through to 10, and all they've not stopped talking about is the Maccabees and the military victory.
There you
They've
go.
Not mentioned the oil.
There you
All three of
go.
them.
Let me say that. Let me say that out
Not
loud so
mentioned
that
the oil at all.
let me say that out loud. Yosef, Jonathan Raymond's son Yosef, whose kids I'm assuming go to a fairly Haredi gan, ages
Between the age of 4.5, 4.5, 10, and 12.
4.5, 10, and 12 in the Haredi schools. They've come home and are talking about the Maccabees and have not mentioned the oil. That would not happen in Chutz La'aretz. Definitely not.
In Antwerp, in the Tachkamoni, the school that I went to, which was a Zionist school.
Okay, so that's a
was
difference. So
it
you're
was. It
yes,
was,
exactly. So there
very
you're proving
much
my
so.
point. You're
Yeah.
proving my point. Anyway, let's
But
go.
wait a second, I want to make a comment. It's probably not relevant, but still. Looking back at the things that you said about the Holocaust and the way we teach Hanukkah and everything, I think that we tend to neglect also the political influences of the time.
Okay,
in
let me
which
say
they
that out
were
loud.
told.
Hannah says we tend to neglect the political influences of the time. Absolutely, we neglect the political influences of the time. And those of you who come to my shiurim will know that historical context and the politics of the time are absolutely vital to understanding what was going on. And we're going to talk about the Maccabees in a minute.
I also had a question about, is it written in the Gemara why they said it shouldn't be included in Birkat Hamazon? Because Hatov Meitiv, which is the last bracha, is also an event that took place late.
And in fact, Hatov Meitiv is not part of the Dioraita.
No, it's not.
So in other words, and
It's-
that's very interesting, you should mention that. I'll just tell you a piece of halacha now. When you make, if you bench on a cup, if you have a cup of wine for benching, there are two opinions as to when you put your cup down, right? One is after Bonei Yerushalayim, because that's the end of the Dioraita. Hatov Meitiv came later after the fall of Beitar.
Mm.
And there's another opinion that says, no, you include that and you put your cup down at Yichasreinu, which is at the end of Hatov Meitiv. So there is a machloket on that point, but the point is made. Right, we have to go and look at the words before we go any further, else we're going to run out of time. I suppose we could do it next week as well. I suppose still Hanukkah next week. Val Hanissim, val Purkam, val Gvurot, val Tshuot, val Niflaot, val Nechamot, val Milchamot. Shasita Lavotenu Bayamim Haheim Bazman Hazeh. On the for. Do we say Alanissim or Ve'alanissim?
Depends if you're a Ashkenazi or a Sephardi.
No, I think no. Yeah, Nusach Anglia is Al Nusach, and that's Nusach Ashkenaz. Nusach Sfard, not Sfardi. Nusach Sfard is Ve'alanissim. Okay, it makes no difference because it's either a full stop or a comma. Right, because it's
Well, I suppose if it's and, it's following on from Modin, so
well, it is. It's part of Modin.
So you're making it clear that it's
yeah.
and.
So, but when you have a conjunction, it's usually because you haven't got a full stop. You can do away with the and if you put a full stop,
Yeah.
right? But yes, it doesn't matter.
Because
We don't need
extra
to get
word,
hung
I think.
up on it.
Oh,
Did you
I
say
think-
Haniflage as well? I think you wrote down.
I said that Baal and Iflot, yeah.
Yeah, which is not here.
You don't have that. Okay, I'm reading in Nusach Sfad Siddur, by the way. Ala Nissim on the miracles, Ala Purkan on another type of miracle, Ala Gvurot on the bravery, at Shuot, the salvation,
yeah, salvation,
Niflaot, the wonders, Nechamot, the comforting, Milchamot, the wars, Sha'asita Lavotenu, that you did to our fathers, Bayamim Ahem, in those days, Bizman Hazeh. What does that mean? In those days, in
This period of the year.
time.
This period of the year.
Bazman Hazeh could mean at this time, yes. Bayamim Ahem, in those days, Bazman Hazeh, at this time of year. Right? Okay. Now, we're in Hanukkah, so we'll do B'mei Matityahu rather than B'mei Mordechai. We'll do that when we come to Purim, please God. B'mei Matityahu ben Yochanan Kohen Gadol Chashmonai Uvanav. Okay. In the days of Matityahu, the son of Yochanan, Kohen Gadol Chashmonai, Uvanav, and his sons. Okay, right. Question: how many sons did Matityahu have?
7.
5.
Okay, 5. What were their names?
Yehuda,
Yehuda,
Shimon.
Shimon,
Shimon,
Elazar,
Elazar.
don't know anymore.
Now, how sad is that?
Forgotten.
That you don't know the 5
At
sons.
our
of-
age, we can
Jonathan?
forget things.
How many days did the oil last for?
8.
Well, so you all know that. Why don't you know the 5 sons of
The name.
Matityahu? For the same reason I just said before, because we weren't
Jonathan?
taught properly, right? We weren't taught properly. That's why. Come on, Hannah, you should know this.
Jonathan?
Jonathan, and one more.
Matityahu.
That was a father.
I know, but maybe they wouldn't have it.
Yochanan. Yochanan. Okay. Yochanan.
But they
Shimon.
would- yeah.
Shimon, Elazar,
Jonathan.
Elazar, Jonathan, Yochanan, and
And
Yehuda. I forgot Yehuda. Happy to forget Yehuda. Right, yeah. So 5 sons, right. So in the days of Matityahu ben Yochanan, where did he live? Modi'in. Modi'in. That's right. What's the story? How did the Hashmonaim all come about?
Matityahu was Kohen Gadol, wasn't he?
he was the high
not
priest.
Kohen Gadol. He
Was
was
he the high
Ben
priest?
Yochanan Kohen Gadol. His father was a Kohen Gadol.
Oh, I thought-
If he was a Kohen Gadol, Hannah, he wouldn't live in Modi'in. Where would he have lived?
Jerusalem.
Yeah. So he wasn't a Kohen Gadol. So the story is that well, what was going on? How did this whole Hashmonaic revolt come to be?
They put a tzelem in the Hechal. They put a statue in the temple,
Okay, and
and they were supposed to bow to it.
yeah, they started the Hellenists started to make rules that were look at this. I've just got a message from Zoom that says it sounds like you might have switched to a different language. Please update it so we can provide better quality transcription.
Mancunian.
Thank you very much. I think we'll just cancel that. That's interesting. Yeah, okay. We're speaking in a different language. Right. So, again, why don't we know this? We all know about the Pach Shemen. Why don't we know the story of the Hashmonaim? Because we weren't taught properly. So let's learn it now. So the Hellenists made rules that said you can't do various things and you must do various other things. What were you not allowed to do?
to celebrate
You were
Shabbat.
not to have a Brit.
You weren't allowed to have a Brit.
Weren't allowed to celebrate Shabbat.
New moon, Rosh Chodesh. Why not? Why
The
was...
calendar was all around.
Yes, they forbade Rosh Chodesh because, think about it,
You want
no
to do
Rosh
it
Chodesh,
now.
you don't know when Rosh Chodesh
And
is.
you don't know when Rosh Hashanah
You
is.
don't know when Rosh Hashanah is, you don't know when Yom Kippur is, you don't know when Pesach is, you don't know when anything is, right? And the other thing you weren't allowed to do was teach Torah. Okay? Because they wanted to introduce Greek culture
assimilate us.
to assimilate us. That's right. They wanted to Hellenize us from the Hellenistic being Hellen being Greek.
But this was already at a time when a lot of the Jews here were Hellenized. They had Hellenized
They'd already
names.
started, for sure. It already started.
they did.
What time of period are we talking? What time period did the Hanukkah story go on? A little bit after Alexander the Great. What time period?
About the 2nd century before the Christian era.
Have you noticed that Philip has the same answer for every time I ask him when something happened? He says it's the 2nd century before the Common Era. And like a clock that is correct at least twice a day. On this occasion, Philip, you're correct.
I know.
It is the 2nd century CE. The Maccabean revolt took place in around about 165
Yeah.
BCE. Okay, so you're right about that.
I know,
Well done.
I know, right.
Okay, so the Hellenists brought in all these rules, including having to bow down to the statue of Zeus. Matityahu wasn't having any of it, and he went off to Modi'in. There's a machloket as to whether he was local to Modi'in, and that's where he came from and he lived, or whether he left Yerushalayim to go to Modi'in. Anyway, they came to Modi'in after him, and they brought this Salem there for him to bow down to, and he refused. So another Jewish fellow came and said, okay, I'll bow down to this thing. Matityahu then got up
Killed him.
and killed both of them.
Both of
The
them.
Jew and the Greek. And then started the sons gathered together the group of soldiers together and started a revolt against the Greeks and against sort of guerrilla warfare type of thing. Maccabee. Why were they called Maccabees? What does Maccabee stand for?
Hammer. Hammer.
Mi kamocha ba'elim Hashem.
Yeah.
Mi kamocha ba'elim Hashem. Who is like you amongst the gods, Hashem? Which was the perfect name. Because what were the Greeks trying to do? They were trying to introduce their
Zeus,
gods into the temple and their gods and culture into the Jewish nation. So the Maccabees said, no, mi kamocha ba'elim Hashem. Who is like you amongst the gods? Nobody. And that was their motto, as it were, mi kamocha ba'elim Hashem. That's how they got the name Maccabee.
Matityahu might have been the son of the Kohen Gadol, but he might have also been in line because he must have been an impressive figure publicly for them to come after him.
Yes, yes. He may well have been in line for the Kohen Gadol. You're quite right. He certainly was
because they came after him.
Yes, he was an important personage. Yes. Okay, so where do we read? There are two main sources that we know about this the Hashmonaim revolt, the Maccabee revolt. Two main sources. Neither of them are in the Tanakh. One is Sefer HaMaccabim. Okay, the Maccabees. Now, why was Maccabee, the Sefer HaMaccabees, not in Tanakh? And I'll ask you a similar question. Why was Megillat Esther in Tanakh? They're both describing events that were miraculous. They're both describing events for which we say Al Hanissim.
One's very much earlier than the other.
Okay.
Maybe some other important things were happening at the time.
It was the Sefer HaMaccabim was in existence when they made the decisions, when the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah made the decision as to who was in and who was out. Why did they out the Maccabees?
Too violent?
No.
Maybe. Don't know. The answer to the question is that's what the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah decided. They decided that this was not going. And there were, by the way, men of the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah who wanted it in. And there were men of the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah who wanted the Megillah out. And there were also men from the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah who wanted Shir HaShirim out. Right? And it was Rabbi Akiva who said, Shir HaShirim, not only is it in, Shir HaShirim is the holiest book of the whole Tanakh kind of thing. So the fact it was in or it was out, I'm not saying Chas v'Chalil, I'm not saying it was arbitrary. There was obviously the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah were men of great standing and they made decisions. But there was very much political involvement in that as well, because it wasn't that long after, and maybe this is what you were saying. You were saying what you're saying, Jeff, is that Purim was safe to put in because it was already long ago, and the Persian Empire had already long fallen, right? The Greco-Roman, if we lump together Greece and Rome, which one sort of really merged into the other. When the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah made the decision of where the Tanakh is, that was still existent. So I'm certain that there were political considerations as to why it went in and why it went out.
Also after Purim, you had the Shivat Zion. The people came back to Israel.
Where we hadn't had this
after the Maccabim, the whole business was.
But we haven't been exiled yet. Maccabim were before the Churban, so we haven't been exiled yet. Right. So they had these laws, and we weren't having anyone, and they were basically zealots. The Hashmonaim were zealots. They were the hardcore, the ones that were saying we're not having this, and we're going to fight back. So then, after they killed this Greek official and this other Jew, the Matityahu and his 5 sons had to run off to the Judean desert, and they began to build a guerrilla warfare force, and then this again took on. So Sefer HaMaccabim was one place where we learn about it. Where else do we learn about it? Another non-Tanakh book. Well, where we have a lot of information. Josephus, correct, Josephus. Josephus writes about it. And those are the two main sources that we have for the Maccabean revolt. The Maccabean revolt brought about a short period of Jewish independence, where they were independent for a very short period of time, which they'd not had for 400 years. We'd had the Bet HaMikdash and everything, but we'd been vassal states. Once we'd left Bavel, we were vassal states to whoever happened to be in charge. And for that short period of time, the Maccabees brought Jewish independence. And so it was a very important feature politically, the Maccabean revolt, because it bucked that trend of hundreds, if not thousands, of years where we were under somebody else's rule. And that is why in modern Israel, the Maccabees are so popular. And that's why Yosef's kids are coming back from their schools, even the Haredi schools, and how much more so the secular schools will be stressing this. And in fact, think about it. This is the beautiful irony of it. We have in Israel today something which is known as the Jewish Olympics.
Yeah.
And what is that called?
Maccabea.
The Maccabea.
Trying to do is not be
Right? And so what does the Maccabea Games do? It copies the Olympic Games. What was the Olympic Games? Where was Olympus? Where did the first Olympic Games come from?
Greece.
Olympus, Greece. Right? Greece. The Olympic Games was the pinnacle
It's the
of
fourth
Greek
largest
culture.
sport meeting in the world. You know that?
This
The
is
Maccabea.
third. This
Fourth.
is after Olympics,
Olympics.
Commonwealth,
Ah, yeah, you're right.
and
the
then
third,
Maccabees, the
yeah,
third.
yeah. Sorry. my
But
mistake.
isn't this a wonderful irony that we are copying the Greek thing and we call it the Maccabee Games?
So we keep our clothes on.
Yeah, we do keep our clothes on, that's true. Don't get me wrong, I think the Maccabea Games are a wonderful thing, right? I think that I've been to several of them, and it's absolutely wonderful to see Jewish boys, girls, men and women coming together
And there's a
and
very-
doing sport here
Some
in
very good
an
level.
independent state of Israel. I think it's an absolutely brilliant thing. But there is an irony, isn't there, that it's called the Maccabea Games. And maybe that was deliberate, because we are in some ways, by calling it the Maccabea Games, we are, I don't know if this was true or not, but in my mind, I've thought about maybe it's called the Maccabea Games because, yes, we're doing games, but we are the Maccabees. We are not
We're
Hellenists.
Jewish
We're
faith.
not Greek. We're not Olympians. We are Maccabeans who were their game singers. I think that is just a beautiful irony, really. So that's about how the Chashmonaim came. Let's just go a little bit more inside the Hanissim. Kisha'amda malchut Yavan harasha'a, when the evil Greek kingdom stood up, al amcha Yisrael, against your people Israel, lahashkicham toratecha, to make them lishkoach, to forget your Torah. How did they want you to forget their Torah? If you weren't allowed
They're
to
not
learn
practicing
it, you
it.
can't learn it. You don't learn it. You're going to forget it. Ulahaviram mechukuratznecha, and to remove them, lahavir, to remove them from the laws of your will. In other words, to prevent them from keeping the Torah. Va'ata, and you, Hashem, barachamecha harabim, you in your great mercy, amadata lahem be'et saratam, you stood
up
up for them at the time of their tsaratam,
Of their
tsurus,
tsurus,
time of their
yeah.
tsurus.
Yeah.
Rafta et rivam,
You fought their fight.
you fought their fight. Danta et dinam, you judged their
judged them, yeah.
judgments. Nikamta et nikmatam, you
You
took
revenged,
vengeance.
yeah.
You took their vengeance.
Yeah.
Masarta giborim biyad chalashim. You handed the giborim, the strong ones, into the hand of the weak ones.
yeah.
Numerically and militarily, the strong ones were the Greek. We were the weak ones. They were handed into us. Rabim biyad ma'atim, numerically, you handed over the many to the few. Tameim biyad tahorim, the Tameim, the impure ones, those Greek impure people. Who were the Tahorim?
The Jews.
Not just the Jews. Who were these Maccabees?
The Kohanim.
Hashmonaim, they were Kohanim,
Yeah.
Tahorim.
Yeah.
Kohanim were Tahor. Urshaim biyad tzadikim. So let's just finish the words. The evil in the hands of the tzadikim. Zaydim biyad oskei Torah. What's a Zaydim?
Zaydim is corrupt.
No,
Worse than corrupt.
How about looking back in the Shemona Esra? Where do we have that word Zaydim? Umachnia Zaydim. What is a Zaydim? They are
immoral.
No, they are the goyim, the avodah zoranics.
Yeah.
Ulecha asita shem gadol v'kadosh b'olamecha. And to you made a great name for yourself and a holy name in your world. Ule'amcha Yisrael, and to your people Israel, asita, you made the following: Shua Gedola, a great salvation. Upurkan ka'ayom hazeh, and a great another word for salvation, victory, like today. V'achakach,
and afterwards.
And after that, ba'u vanecha lidvir beitecha. Your children came into
Your
Dvir Beitech. What's Dvir?
Dvir is the temple.
Dvir is the temple.
Yeah.
Into the temple. Your house, the temple. Ufinu et heichalecha. What's finu?
And they cleared out.
Cleared out. When you go to a restaurant and the waitress comes to you and says, "Efshar lafanot."
Can I?
What does that mean? It means can I clear the table?
Yeah.
Ufinu et heichalecha. Cleared out your heichal. What did he clear it out of?
All the things
Zeus got all
Yeah.
those idols, cleared them out. V'tiharu et mikdashecha, and purified your holy place. V'hidliku neirot b'chatzrot kodshecha. Here you've got a hint, only a hint here of the oil. And we lit the neirot in your holy courtyard. V'kavu shmonat yimei Chanukah elo, and we fixed these 8 days of Chanukah. What for? Lahodot.
To
thank, lahalel, to praise,
praise.
l'shimcha hagadol, to your great name. What a beautiful prayer, right? Is that not a beautiful prayer, right? And it says it all. That is what we're thanking for, and it's in there. No, 1 second,
Yeah.
1 second. Where do you see God's name in there? You don't.
No, you don't. No.
You don't. Where else don't you see God's name? In
Purim,
Megillat
Megillah.
Esther. Oh, there's a coincidence, right? Why is God's name not in Megillat Esther?
Because
Because it was a hidden miracle. Why is God's name in?
God's name is written all over it, that's why.
Because what?
God's name is written all over it.
What, with Hamelech, you mean?
Well, no, it just in the whole thing. It's a miracle, as you say.
Yeah, but it's a hidden miracle. It was a hidden miracle.
Yeah.
Hanukkah is a hidden miracle, right? No, God's name's not in Hanissim.
But
We talk about God, we talk about God, your miracle, your, but he's not mentioned by name. And that is why it's in Modim. Al nisecha shebechol yom imanu. It belongs with the miracles that are somewhat hidden. So the Al Hanissim prayer that we have here is absolutely in the right place. Yes, Philip.
But I'm thinking, Modim is a prayer because we thank, Modim anachnu loch. Al Hanissim,
Yes.
It's more of a declaration.
No,
It's a declaration saying that we appreciate what was done. But I think it's more of a declaration.
No, it's not. I'll tell you why it's not.
Why?
Because of what we say. Modim anachnu, you said it yourself.
Yeah.
Modim anachnu loch. We thank you.
Yeah.
And then we've got all these things that we
Yeah.
thank you for.
And then you come to Al Hanissim.
Listen, and for the miracles. We're
So,
thanking you for the
If
miracles.
you put the vav there, yes. But if you don't put the vav there, no. So
Okay, maybe all right. So maybe the vert is important then.
yes, very important.
Yeah. Yes, Hannah.
Back to where it says V'alaviram michukei lahashkichan toratecha. We couldn't learn Torah.
Yeah, to forget your Torah. It calls us to forget the Torah.
Torah. V'lahaviram michukei retzoncha. So I was thinking the other two things were Rosh Chodesh and Brit Milah, and both of those things are commanded by the Torah.
Correct.
They're both
Correct.
God says.
Correct.
You're
So,
to do this.
so we've got hints there, haven't we, to the three main things?
Chukei retzonecha.
Yes. Yes. Chukei Ritzonecha, which is Brit Milah, and Rosh Chodesh was a piece of genius on their part, really, wasn't it? to prevent you. If I was to say to you, right, I'm not allowing you. You can choose the things you want to not do to get rid of Judaism. Kashrus, maybe Taras and Mishpacha, Shabbos. You wouldn't think of Rosh Chodesh. I wouldn't think of Rosh Chodesh. That's a piece of
The same
genius.
thing happened
Piece
though.
of genius, because without Rosh Chodesh, you can't do anything. No Yom Tov.
The same thing happened with the split between Yehuda and Yosef. The split of the nations into Israel and Yehuda, that in the northern provinces changed the dates.
Right. Which is why the Samaritans have a different whole bunch of whole different times. Right.
Johnny,
We're out of time.
Talking about Rosh Chodesh.
Yeah.
When we announce Rosh Chodesh every month, we're actually saying Misha Hanissim Lafotainu.
Ah, that's a good point. Let's have a look at that. Frank has just said that when we bench Rosh Chodesh, which we will do this Shabbat, by the way, we say Misha Hanissim, don't we? Let's just have a look at that. It's straight after the Haftorah and Yakum Purkon. Okay, here we go. Yehiratzon, we ask Hashem to give us a good month, right? It's on page 360, Goldie. We ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to give us a good month. The Chazan takes the Sefer Torah, and what does he say? Misha asa nisim lavotenu, v'gaol otam me'avdut lecherut, hu yigal otanu b'karov v'kabeitz nidachenu be'arba kanfot haaretz, chaverim kol Yisrael v'nomar amen. The fact that it says Misha asa nisim, Frankie wants to say that is a hint to us of the nisim of Chanukah. I like it.
And that's become part of the Seder and the Tefilah for Yom Ha'atzmaut as well. We say Misha Asa.
We do.
Well.
Yeah. So these nisim, Yom Ha'atzmaut, was that a nes? Yes, it was a nes. So again, we still come back to where we'll end where we started. There are some people who say we should be saying Al Hanissim. There are some people who say we should say Hallel on Yom Ha'atzmaut, and there are some people who say we should say Hallel with a bracha on Yom Ha'atzmaut and Yom Yerushalayim, and there are some who say we should say Al Hanissim and not Hallel and not with a bracha, and all those things. It doesn't really matter whether you do it with a bracha, without a bracha, Al Hanissim, not Al Hanissim. Recognize that it's a nes. Recognize that we are here.
It's the intention that counts.
Through the greatness of the miracles of HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
But we also recognise the nes, because before the Megillah and the candle lighting, we say She'asa Nisim.
She'asa Nisim,
We're
correct.
actually saying it there.
We are. It's all about Nisim, and it's Pirsuma de Nisa. It's all about where we start at the beginning, publicizing the miracle, saying out loud that this is a miracle, and all that Sufganiyot and all that are in the shots from straight after Sukkot, and all those. I must be honest with you. I never used to like all that Chabad business when I was in Chutz La'aretz. I was a little bit embarrassed by these stupid cars that went with these, things on top of their head and on top of their roofs and Trafalgar. I didn't like it. I was wrong. I shouldn't have had that feeling of, embarrassment of have to that gullus Jew that has to keep his head down. No, I don't. I've changed my tune. On that, and I think we have to do the Pirsume de Nisa as much as we possibly can. The more donuts, the better, and the more Chanukiot in the streets, the better. And we should all have a miraculous Chanukah, and we should have another miracle very soon and bring back all our Chatufim.
Talking about the Greeks.
Quietly.
So